You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. And Herds, can you believe that it's that time already?
I can, because we do this every 3 weeks, Flex, but maybe you can't, which is why we are up to the third week of Blackstone Fell by Martin Edwards.
I should be clear. I do expect that the third week comes around every 3 weeks, but I do mean that this is our last episode of the year before review season.
I know. It's horrifying, really.
It is.
Well, this is our fourth year, not our fourth whole year, but our fourth end of year wrap up. It's pretty insane. We spent a lot of time on this, and I kind of love that.
Anyhow, let's get stuck into Blackstone Fell because, gosh,
isn't it the best? Oh my goodness!
what an ending!
Yeah,
what an ending!
I've been hyping you up for the past 2 weeks out of the 3 weeks that I have to talk to you about this book, about the ending, because I could just ramble about this for the entire show, but the fact that it's not just that the actual suspect breakdown accusation scene is one of the more ridiculous ones that I've managed to be a part of.
The first suspect and breakdown scene.
Well, that's what I'm getting exactly, because the first breakdown scene is the seance where they bring in a Tilly Curl and they're do this thing where you trick the murderers into giving themselves up, basically, which is it's like a trope. But she's got Curl using the voice of Nell Fagan because, again, this story is all about Cornelia's ghost being thrown from one end of the book to the other and her will being carried out and all that great stuff. Rachel executes this scene with such precision to the point where she basically kills both of the people she's investigating. She doesn't allow the officer Oakes to save Daphne from her death. And then when Carruthers hangs himself in his cell with his shoelaces, she says, "Oh, well, I wouldn't worry about that because Daphne's probably got some records somewhere in case you ever need to blackmail Carruthers. So you can sort all that out with the hard evidence that she's collected for you, Mr. Officer."
I mean, it's so good
great.
too, because the presentation of it is just ridiculous.
Chilling. I love it.
A Tilly Curl, as the characters kind of say in the scene, is so good at summoning the voice of a person that she's never heard that they kind of can't believe it.
We're not supposed to believe in the supernatural. It's been outlawed by Knox. But that doesn't mean you can't have a little bit of magic thrown in, a little bit of razzle-dazzle, and dare I say something with incredible spiritual weight. We're not really seeing the real Nell Fagan come back, but the words that Rachel is putting in Tilly Curl's mouth give that impression, and it feels significant.
The other thing that I thought is that the whole thing of Nell's setup in this novel is that she is irrational in the way that she approaches this. And it's this kind of celebration of the fact that irrationality still got us there in the end.
I mean, there's definitely a theme here about directed chaos and directed lies and manipulations, because roughly half the people that Rachel is working with are murderers and liars and schemers, probably including herself.
Probably.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, though, if Rachel was posed the trolley problem, I reckon that she would double track drift.
Oh, she'd have to. She'd have to Tokyo drift down those lanes and hit all the murderers.
Yeah.
That's what she would do. And yeah, to your point, this is not the only suspect breakdown scene. We see, I'm going to keep harping on this, but Nell's character journey, even with her being dead, we see her embodied in the actions of Peggy.
Yes.
Who, of course, is our final killer of the novel, who avenges her and carries out, all the tasks that Nell was set to do. She's a stand-in for Nell. She's the ghost of Nell. You might even say the walking corpse of Nell.
Yes.
And then at the very end of the novel, she just wanders off.
Yeah, we've been building up this entire thing that someone could accidentally wander off the path into the swamp and
then she
die.
does it on purpose.
She does it on purpose.
So good.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's so good. I cannot explain to you how much I love the character arcs that we go through and how ordered the chaos is.
I know.
All the characters feel believable and real, and the mystery doesn't go completely off the rails. The structure of this story, Martin Edwards, it's perfect.
It's immaculate. It is absolutely immaculate. I also love that as Peggy walks into the swamp, you're kind of left with this feeling that, like, on the one hand, it is this very somber, poignant closing of the book, both proverbially and literally, but also, like, Rachel's just kind of letting it happen.
Yep. Well, that's the thing, like, right?
The perfect closing point for both Nell's story and Rachel's.
Yeah.
Where Rachel's just, like, completely along for the ride, but in control.
Well, she has to let people, like, be people.
Yeah.
She says something to the effect, because Nell, she's about facts and logic, and isn't that what your detectives are about? And she says, no, we're about human nature. That's what we're most interested in. And she's realized that maybe somewhere deep in her heart that what she did to Nell drove her to die. Like, there is maybe something in there. She has to let people make their own decisions. She has to let Nell go back to Blackstone knowing that she might die. She has to let Peggy wander off and into the swamp to probably die because she has cancer. It's a whole thing. It's like not an entirely unforeseen plot point. She's not just doing it to, like, get away from the murder she's committed. She's also doing it because she's been flagged as doomed to die.
I mean, the other interesting death, of course, that we get in this section is Judith and Quintus.
I'm so sad.
It's on the one hand, fictionally excellent because it's a kind of gut punch because you've been feeling that, like, Judith is kind of going to get one back at Quintus in the end. But this, like, painfully harrowing thing that the only punch that she could give was, like, mutually assured destruction.
At least the dog survived, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Thank goodness.
But no, I mean, look, I agree with you not to brush the double homicide or homicide-suicide, whatever, aside. Like, it's horrible and I hate it. And, like, the fact that the marriage and the situation there, like, it turned into something that could only explode is horrible. But, like, yeah, it ties into that idea of there being just fates that you can't escape, which is something that's echoed in Peggy and Nell's stories, of course.
I suppose so, but I also thought that it was, like, interesting as a tonal prelude to the 3 deaths that we got after the crimes were revealed, where like Martin Edwards was kind of setting up that this is going to be gruesome. There's not really a nice way out of the horrible things that the people have done.
It's going to be messy.
Like, in some senses, it is unsatisfying that nobody really gets away well from this novel, but on the flip side of that, I think that it works very well to set your expectations.
Hold on now, except for Major Huckabee, who apparently is like implied that he's finally learning to move on from his wife's death now that he knows that he didn't kill her, and that maybe he's going to get with that busty barmaid down at the tavern. And look, I just have to point out, something good came of this. And Jacob got his story. Packed with lies, but he got his story.
That was weird. That was quite weird. I guess it would have been weird no matter what they did.
Look, 2 characters got what they wanted, sort of.
I suppose. I guess Rachel got what she wanted.
Well, Rachel wants what's worse for everyone around her, which is to find another mystery.
Can I talk about one last thing before we run out of time in this segment, though, Herds?
Always. I love one more thing.
Jacob, hopeless.
Is this about the pants?
This is about the pants.
This is about the pants? Okay.
We have this entire scene where they're solving the, like, historical locked room of the 1600s. Jacob being a sprightly young man with an infatuation, as he is dangling Rachel by the ankles.
Well, hold on, he's about to dangle her, let's be clear. But
yes.
He's in the process of preparing
He just can't stop observing the fact that he gets to hold his dainty maiden's ankles. And
he realizes why she wore pants today.
It's just...
Because she was afraid of an upskirt. It's horrendous.
It's terrible.
Jacob is a horrendous character.
But can I tell you my favorite line? And this is a very obvious favorite line in that scene. Is Jacob asks, like, "Oh, aren't you worried that I'll drop you?" And Rachel says, "No, because if you do, Truman will send you right in after me."
Yeah, that's great.
What a response.
What a threat. He'd do it too.
He would.
He'd do it.
He would. Anyway, we should wrap this here and come back to talk about the mystery at the back of the show. We are discussing Martin Edwards' Blackstone Fell all the way to the end of the novel. This is Death of the Reader, your murder mystery world tour. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. It is time, once again, to turn over to our conversation with Martin Edwards about Blackstone Fell. This is the spoilery part of our discussion, at least a slice of it. The full discussion will be up on the podcast in just a few days' time after this episode airs. We're going to jump back in to that conversation with Martin Edwards talking about the clue finder at the end of the book. One thing I really liked in Blackstone Fell was the way the language in this clue finder obfuscated the complex game of identities that you played. I suppose to lead into the next line of questioning, do you anticipate some readers getting a bit too eager and jumping ahead to it? Is that why it's all so vaguely written in this one?
That's exactly right. You have deduced the explanation to that little mystery. Yes, and of course it is always possible, he said, being generous, that you can accidentally open a book very close to the end, and so I think if that were to happen, it would be a shame if inadvertently you'd find out things you really don't want to know, and that is something that you find in Daly King's clue finders. It's something that I've taken from his example.
Well, I found it very, very fun, actually, that the clue finder singled out Peggy as the murderer when we've got 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 in a whole killers. Was that just an artifact of the clue finder masking the book's secrets, or why do you think that Peggy deserves the definite article before murderer?
Well, that is a really interesting question, and I shall tell you the honest truth, which is that was the driver for the plot. All the way in my mind, my starting point was this mystery, the Peggy strand of the story, if you like. So Peggy doesn't feature in the story extensively, but in my mind, she was the key person. And it was thinking about that idea, the idea of the relationship with the writer, the child, and so on, and the swindle in the past, that really was the fulcrum of the entire plot. And of course, the book ends with Peggy's fate at the end of the story, and I wanted that to be the finale to it, because everything really has been leading up to that moment when she wanders out into the marsh, and of course a lot has gone on before you get to that point, and I've taken the reader down a whole host of byways, but that was really the crux of the story as far as I was concerned.
Well, it's the emotional ending, right? Like you say that Peggy is not very present in the story, and that's true, and the character of Peggy, but in my mind, she's very much an extension of the character of Nell Fagan. That emotional, note that we finish on really is why I love the ending to this book, because it manages to both have its cake at the seance and eat it too when it comes to Peggy's emotional ending.
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic.
Well, thanks. Well, I'm thrilled you say that, because that's exactly the response I was hoping for.
The biggest pieces of the novel are subplots, and we end the novel with 4, arguably 5, arguably 6 murderers, which is something that, on the one hand, part of me is like, yes, Martin Edwards trying to up the difficulty of the genre, as though that was the thing we needed to do. But on the other hand, is also this brilliant thing where it makes the story feel so natural that all of these people who have struggled for similar reasons in their lives have all ended up in this circumstance that has attracted them all. Was there a level of you trying to just keep upping the mystery side of the novel, or did it all come out of that kind of character focus that we've just been talking about with Peggy?
It was largely out of the character focus, because in terms of trying to drill down into how I set about writing it, I began with that idea. Then I wanted the subplot, and then the idea of the sanatorium and everything associated with it came to me by degrees. And then I saw what would happen to Nell. That Nell had to be a victim. That it was apparent to me that she couldn't survive, because I did enjoy writing Nell very much, and there was a big part of me that didn't want that to go before the book was over. Having approached the book in that way, it meant that I suddenly had on my, or not suddenly, but eventually had on my hands a pretty complicated plot. And whilst I don't try to up the level of difficulty or complexity just for the sake of it, given that I'm trying to explore this tension between the melodrama and the unlikelihood and implausibility of the Golden Age stories with the way that people are and the way that people were in the 1930s and the way that life was in the 1930s, trying to encompass that in a story that keeps me interested and engaged from page one to the last page. And that sense of personal engagement is very, very important to me as a writer. It does mean that there has to be a lot going on, much more so than is the case of my contemporary mysteries. But that's part of the appeal of going back in time and delving into the Golden Age style, the Golden Age period.
I like to think that all the little coincidences that pop up in your novels are just Rachel manipulating events. I think, honestly, she'd make a great villain with the amount of conspiring and the army of servants she happens to wield. I'm just saying.
I mean, that's how Rachel has to go, right? Rachel has to be the villain of her last novel.
Become a crime lord. Go for it.
Well, she has her dark side, extremely ruthless, and again that side of her is evident in the new book, Sepulchre Street, and that again is part of the appeal of writing Rachel. She's certainly not a goody two shoes. She's a dangerous person to know, and she's a very, very dangerous person to get on the wrong side of. And of course, characters like that are great fun to write.
I'm excited to see how dark her character can get, I suppose, as we go forward. Now, on a lighter topic, I tend to think... Potentially. We'll see how we go. I tend to think of word games in murder mysteries as kind of puzzles that only a fraction of a novel's reader base will truly engage with, like a bonus puzzle almost. But you've managed to tie word games into so many aspects of the story, big and small. Nemesis and Nathan Hart and the Baconian cipher. How in the game of high stakes murder do you find the time to percolate these more obfuscated, less mechanical puzzles?
Well, I do agree with you that your basic point, I think, is absolutely right, that the vast majority of readers will only engage with these technical puzzles to a limited extent. So instead, what I try to do is, and also because, of course, there's a limit to my ability to come up with very, very intricate word puzzles. And so, I've not necessarily got that mind to the extent that John Dixon Carr had. But I have small examples which I will plant in where it goes with the grain of the story. Or if it goes against the grain of the story, it goes against the grain of the story for a good reason. And what happens in practice is that sometimes you come up with an idea and you test it. And you think, well actually that wouldn't work for whatever reason. Either it's too banal or it's too complicated. And then I think you just have to discard it. And so the puzzles that make the cut and get into the story are those that seem to me to fit in some way and to add to the reader's experience.
Well, Martin, I have had such a wonderful time with Blackstone Fell, and it was such a delight to really get into the weeds this time. Mortmain Hall last time, I got to pick your brain a little bit, but I'm so happy that we got to get all the way into it this time. So thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Well, it's been great fun, and your analysis is fascinating to me as a writer, and I'm really grateful for the time and trouble you've taken, and obviously for your reaction to the book, which is what it's all about from the writer's point of view.
Awesome. Well, we will have links to Blackstone Fell, Life of Crime, and Martin's extended work up on the podcast if you want to check any of it out, which you absolutely should. Oh my goodness. This is Death of the Reader. We are talking Blackstone Fell here on your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we'll be back with more in just a second. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for the final mystery breakdown of the year.
Oh my goodness.
Herds, how did I do?
How are you going to break this down?
How did I do?
Here's the thing.
The singular thing?
Okay, there may be a couple of things I want to discuss with you, but when you sat down last week and you said, I've got it all figured out, I believed, I was incredulous, actually. At first I was incredulous. I thought, wow, there's no way he has everything figured out 100%. But you got to the point where you said, I've figured out the 4 murderers. And I went, I was a frog stuck in my throat at that moment. I figured, you figured it out.
I feel like there were a lot of frog stuck in your mouth moments for weird things that I said over the course of this book in hindsight.
Shout out to hypnotism. We'll get to that. Because the 4 criminals that I was most interested in you catching were Harold Lejeune, who is, of course, Weaver. I was also interested in you catching Caritas because he's the obvious psychopathic murderer.
Yep.
And Peggy because she's the secret boss. But the 4th murderer,
was not in fact a hole in the ground.
Yes, you said the 4th murderer is a hole in the ground, and you're not wrong. The hole in the ground does eat people up forever.
Yes.
And their bones do dwell at the bottom of its gullet. But the 4th murderer that I thought that you were going to pin down was Daphne Sambrook, I believe is her last name. The story goes that Caritas saw in her a woman of great strength and power that her brother could never have seen because he's a eugenics Nazi kind of guy. Let's ignore him for now. And she's been cooking the books, squirreling away funds so that she and so Daphne and Caritas could use those funds because of all these gambling problems that everybody has in this town. She's the real mastermind of the sanatorium.
In hindsight, I feel very amateurish for having missed it because in a crime where I myself accused people of being in debts, the person doing the books where the criminal worked was the obvious accomplice.
It was.
But I got so caught up in the whole idea that Harold Lejeune had to tie to the main crimes somehow that I shoehorned him in as the money guy of the operation without really
this is the thing.
Considering it.
All of these awful people are connected to a club, a gambling casino club, whatever, called the Hermes.
Yes.
When Truman goes to talk to the sanatorium people, the first conversation with dad and brother procures no fruit. But when he goes to talk to Daphne, she keeps asking him, but where did you hear about this? What place did you hear about this?
For the Hermes.
She's looking for the Hermes. And so when he says, and they even, this is the best part. I love, when he's thinking about this, we have this little narration bit where he's like, this line is the most important line. Rachel has impressed upon me that what I say here is the most important thing. And I have to say this line that I met him in a bar or a tavern or whatever. And Daphne says, oh, that's okay, moving on. And he says, well, I don't know what I did wrong. I did everything that Rachel told me to do, but it was that line. If he had said, I met a man at the Hermes and he told me to come see you, it would have been gravy.
It was challenging because I'm pretty sure the word Hermes only appears once up to chapter 23, which is a little cruel, I will confess.
It is.
But like at the same time, it really does nicely structurally lead into that. I think the big trap for me is that because they mention every time that Thomas Baker walked out of the club in London with like women on his shoulder, my brain had like categorized it as a brothel and kind of moved on.
See, my brain definitely do that. I thought of like a big suit with like a top hat and he's like, oh, look at me, I'm flaunting all the money I have. But that's just how it be. And that said, to get to my point, I am going to be giving you 3 points for this novel.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that you did an excellent job at solving the locked room mystery with Abab, which is ridiculous, and catching Weaver. And I mean, look, Caritas isn't really worth a point. He's like the gimme murderer. So there you get 2 points for that. 3rd point for giving 2 solutions, but I will withhold the 4th for not completely solving the sanatorium mystery.
No, I think that's fair. Like, if I was to be really picky about my own solution, I think that trying to shoehorn in Harold Lejeune like on top of Caritas whilst ignoring his connection to Judith was like a pretty big miss as well, because
to be fair, I didn't really push you on that. I should have. So
that was obviously the tie-up point for for how Judith had found out about Nell. And I think if you'd asked me about it, I would have been able to answer that very easily, but it wasn't something that I had necessarily considered naturally on my own until I got to the end of the book. On the one hand, I feel like with all of the weird word games and ciphers and stuff going on in this novel, like this is the book that I've been training for the past 4 years. But at the same time, I really appreciate how well this book, in the same way that the Clue Finder does, upends my main method of like picking a solution and then rereading. Because I think one of the reasons that I didn't end up getting like Daphne was because really Harold made sense as the fixer if I posed him as a theory and read through the book, because there were so many different killers, each with their own signposts.
I think it was also interesting that there was some that I thought were fairly obvious that I don't know if you didn't notice them or just neglected to mention them, like how the Blackstone Tower is like overgrown when Harold Lejeune is supposedly a famous collector of plants.
Yeah.
It's not just the plants. Like they keep talking about how much they don't see him anymore, and like his tower's falling apart, and like why doesn't he care about his family? And it's because he's not of the family. It's the same thing as with the Daphne scene where she's like trying to.
There's even like a line where Harold says that he met his brother like twice in his entire life.
He's like, we didn't have much in common. We didn't really talk much. I don't even remember his middle name, honestly. Like, it's crazy how little we spoke. Like, it's comical on a reread. And that really lends itself to the atmosphere, I think, and to the enjoyment of the reread.
Absolutely. Well, Herds.
Yeah.
I think I've said what I have to say until review season about Blackstone Fell.
I'm excited for review season.
It is. This book is like a prime candidate for the podium places.
I know it is.
I was not expecting it to rank so highly when I first started, but the further I got in and the more I went over it, I'm like, God, this is exquisite.
I told you, it's intricate. It's an intricate bag of candy, delicious candy.
What is a
that
murder
we've
mystery?
thrown into the bog? Okay, let's not throw anything into the bog. I totally agree. It is 100% a candidate for the podium places for review season. And goodness, I just need to read the rest of these books. Honestly, I need to read the rest of these Rachel's 7-Acre or 7-Acre novels.
I really enjoyed Mortmain Hall. I didn't get the time to like do the full reread of it because it was for an interview and those things tend to be a bit quicker. But yeah, you're right. I want to go back and reread the whole thing. And there's a 4th book coming out that started next year.
I want to dig into this whole island business because again, like I haven't read the first 2 books, and there's this like all this crazy stuff happened on the island to Rachel and the gang, and you don't even want to know about it. And I'm like, but I do want to know about it. Tell me more.
Anyhow,
it's great.
I suppose review season is up next. We'll be off for 6 weeks this time, but there are, of course, reviews coming through. We've got a couple of other bonus features that we'll be squeezing into review season this time, since we are taking a slightly longer break than usual. It's
going to be good
because we're busy individuals with jobs outside the show now.
It's true.
But start of next year, Benjamin Stevenson's Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone.
Yo.
And I think you will love this book, Herds. It is
ready. Is it crazy? Is it like
the perfect reversal of what Martin Edwards has done here?
Reversal? What does that mean?
Well, instead of being grim and well executed, it's stupid and well executed, and I love it. And the Decalogue is on the first page of the book. So,
is it? Okay, that's an interesting sign, isn't it? All right. Well, I guess I'll be bringing out the old tomes.
All 9 items from the Decalogue.
9? You know what? That sounds right. I'm pretty sure the original Latin phrasing of deca, it means 9-sided.
It's just like how October is the 8th month of the year, you know?
Exactly. Same sort of thing. How August doesn't exist.
That's right. Alrighty. Well, we will see you next week for review season, and I hope you enjoy your summer and or winter reading, depending on what part of the world you join us from.
Read so many books.
Yeah, I mean, hit us up at Flex and Herds Facebook, Instagram, Twitter with your recommendations for next year of the show, because we're still putting the next season's run list together.
Yeah, let us know what you want us to do and what cool books. What cool books we should read. That's always a fun time. Tell me about the cool books. What's your favorite book you've read this year? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, all the best for the holiday season, and we will see you next week.